Welcome, friends. Welcome, colleagues. Welcome, everyone, to the first Magisterial Mission Summit. My name is Byron Belitzos. I'm your co-host along with Meredith and Dave Tenney. Many of you know that Mara and Dave and I started this initiative some months ago, early in actually late last year. And we got underway in January, having monthly meetings discussing the Magisterial Mission. So I guess we're kind of visionary types, and we look forward to the future of the magisterial age, which is the platform for the coming light and life ages of light and life. And so we called ourselves the Light and Life Community. That's really kind of a grassroots idea, and we have a small group that convenes every month, as I said. And so this is kind of the culmination of what we're doing for now, is to have a summit and invite speakers to give their best ideas about the coming magisterial mission and the present moment as well. So we have so many people who would have been highly qualified to speak, so we had a tough time getting this down to a very small group. And as a result of the time the time limits, we have decided to mute everybody through the discussion, so we can just squeeze everybody in that's the featured speakers. And at the end of it, at 4 p.m. Eastern time, then we will open it up for, for a calm and sober discussion of the many things that we have discussed. So at 4 p.m. we'll open that up and host that, so everyone can get, say, a minute or so of their reflections. So I want to now turn it over to co-host Meredith Tenney, who will introduce what's going to happen today. Meredith?
Thanks, Byron. We're going to run for 3 hours total, from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. EST. And we'll begin with an opening prayer by Dave, and then have 5 speakers, starting with Barb Newsom and Robert Sarmast. They're each talking about 20 minutes apiece. Then a 7-minute break. Then Byron Belitzos, Donna Dingolo, and myself, each talking about 20 minutes each. And another 7-minute break, which I hope will allow all of you to stretch and move around and get something to drink or whatever else you need to do. Followed by closing remarks by Byron and Dave, and then a closing prayer by me. And beyond that, after we've completed the formal program, as Byron described, we hope to invite everyone to share a brief reflection on the experience today and their thoughts. If you have a longer statement, those can be addressed to Byron at his email address. Byron, can you give your email address?
Yeah, you're welcome to send anything you'd like to write of any kind, feedback or input or your views, to me at Byron, B-Y-R-O-N, at originpress.com, ORIGINPRESS.com. Just send it to me and we'll compile your thoughts. Really want to hear what you have to say. And again, we would have liked to have had this interactive, but I think now it's in order to hear from those who've been really thinking about this a long time. So back to you, Meredith.
Well, we want to start by opening a sacred space, and I'm going to hand it over to Dave for an opening prayer.
Welcome, everyone. All right, let's begin just with some relaxation. I'd like you to be aware of your breath just flowing as it is, in and out. Close your eyes if you wish. Get into a comfortable position. And just simply begin to appreciate this particular moment in eternity where we are meeting for this theme. Simply be aware of your breath flowing in and out through your heart centers. Dear God, Thank you for your triune, universal, eternal, and infinite nature. Universal Father, it's our will that your will be done. We thank you for your loving presence within each and all of us. Beloved indwelling spirits of our hearts and minds and souls, thank you for your ever-loving guidance, helping us to attune to our Father's will and to act in harmony with it more and more. Eternal Mother and Son in one, thank you for your merciful, loving presence, for our Michael, and for all of our other Paradise Sons you send to help us on our journey. Infinite Spirit, thank you for your loving ministry through our Mother Supreme, our local universe, Mother Spirit, and through the rest of our universal family of sisters and brothers in spirit. Michael, thank you for your loving presence with us here today. Inspire and uplift us, open our hearts, and fill them with your love. And Mother Spirit, thank you for your ever-loving, everywhere presence. And for all of our sisters and brothers, both seen and unseen. Touch us and hold us with your loving presence, and connect us all in your Holy Spirit circuit. Spirit of truth, guide us as we seek a greater understanding about and awareness of our promised Divinal Son, who I invite to join us in spirit. May we all move forward today in unity of spirit, despite our diversity of thoughts, feelings, experiences, and perspectives. Let's remain in silent communion with all of our universal family for a few more minutes in silence. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Dave, for your connection to spirit and your capacity to open that up for all of us. Now we'll begin with our first speaker, Barbara Newsom. Barbara is a founder and director of the Urantia Historical Society and a recognized expert on the early history of the Forum and the Urantia movement. Beyond that, Barbara is a friend and a distinguished colleague who has participated in many, many educational sessions over the years. Barbara, are you unmuted? And can you speak a couple of words to the group before we begin?
I am now. Thank you, host. And I just want to say how joyous it is for me to join you. I hope my mic's working for everyone. I chose to do the recorded sessions today for a lot of reasons, but one was these were interviews that we had earlier in developing this process of Light and Life community groups. And the main introduction I want to say is my journey toward Light and Life started when I was 17. I'm just really one of the most fortunate people in the world, I think. I started reading the Urantia teachings so young. And I was even in just drew me to the Urantia teachings. What I wanted to say today was hope for the future is really, and also focusing as those who follow the Urantia revelation on destiny. I really love the forward-lookingness of the Urantia book and the hope for the future. And with that, I've trusted the group to select the best excerpts, so take it away.
Thank you, Barbara. If you started on the road to Light and Life when you were 17, you must be almost there by now.
In heart, I am open. That would be my other thing, Meredith. I think for me, even today, I have to pray for more openness. I want to be open and be here to greet whatever is coming next. And in a life like our planet, that's saying a lot.
Indeed it is. We have several small clips of Barbara speaking, and if you'll be patient, I'll set that up now.
Okay. And while she's doing that, some of you I know, and some of you are longtime friends, and others I may not know, but I did this series of interviews really because my dear friend Carolyn Kendall was no longer able to interview. And this group graciously asked me to call Carolyn and see if it would be okay. And she was thrilled. She said, yes, I believe all of these things, even more so now than ever, which is probably like me, you know, now an old timer saying, you know, this stuff is really real and it's good and it's not, it's something to be thankful for and aware of and move forward with. So I did this in memory of Carolyn. She's still with us, of course, but not able really to participate on a computer session like this anymore. So it was wonderful to have that chance to speak with her about it before we did the interview that you're about to see.
Hello, everybody. This is Byron Belitzos. I'm with the Light and Life Communities group, and this is our next interview in a series of interviews. This time we're with Barbara Newsom, who's a distinguished member of our Urantia community going back decades and is a very close friend of all of us. She has agreed graciously to speak to us about Carolyn Kendall's marvelous article, which we asked everybody to read. And because Carolyn is not quite up to it, she's home with her caregiver, and she's given permission for Barbara to speak to us today. And we're going to have 3 segments. The first segment is our beloved Meredith Tenney asking some opening questions for Barbara. And anyway, welcome Barbara to our circle of inquiry. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
You bet. You bet.
Good afternoon, everyone. Barbara, I'm so excited to hear your answers to some of these questions. Last night, I sat and reread Carolyn Kendall's article and was struck anew by how prescient it was and astute. She wrote it in 2008, so that was a dozen years ago now. Have you been in contact with her since, and have her perceptions changed?
Oh my. Well, to answer, since then, Carolyn and I are just dear friends. We are colleagues as well in history. So we were already in that kind of relationship in 2008. And we talk to each other all the time and visit up until we've had to be isolated because of the virus. So we just finished a lovely conversation this afternoon after I saw all the questions so that I could tell her about the interview and get her reactions. So yes, and it was a good thing we decided to do that. Are you ready to hear what she says about the article, or do you have another question first?
No, I'd love to hear what her thoughts are on it are now. And also I'd love to hear, Barbara, what your thoughts on it are.
Oh, well, first of all, I'm really glad to have reread it as well. I don't know when I had recently looked at it, and it was really great review of all of this foundation, I would say, for the future. Carolyn and I have always really been enthused about the future and what we can do to help our planet have a wonderful future, because that's what we believe is intended. So this was a great review. And when I asked her, I said, Carolyn, first of all, she wanted to be sure she knew which article. She said, give me the title again, because she's written several pieces. And I told her and reminded her it was in the Herald in 2008. And she said, oh, yes, that was fun. Her first comment was, writing that one was fun. And then so I asked her, well, have you changed any of your thoughts? And she says, well, no, of course not that. But she said, what I will tell you is I like it even more today. She says it's even more important today than it was when she first wrote it.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah, so. Well, and she would add to that. She expanded on that a bit. She says, the main reason is that the universe is expanding and will continue to expand. And so we're constantly moving forward.
Do you know with her perceptions, Barbara? And
absolutely. That's why this is so much fun for me. Literally, Carol and I'm glad she said that. We just have fun. I mean, this to us is just what makes life worth living. And we do keep it real. And I will say that was my final little point that I would put into a written article, taking notes like a journalist. She said, today, though, we need to bring the humanity of it. She said, when you do the interview today, don't just talk about the celestials or our unseen friends. She said, we really like them. We've always really felt close to them. Our unseen friends, the celestial beings. But she said, what's so important is to bring the humanity of this project together so that people can be partners with our celestial friends. And that was what her update is. And I'm planning to be true to that, because this is her article. And I'm really honoring her as a lifelong friend when I do that.
Well, that's a good lead into my second question, Barbara.
Sure.
Things are changing, as we all know. The world is becoming so strange and different than it was a year ago. In particular, I see the Urantia community changing dramatically. We became closer knit with the advent of social media and Facebook, but Zoom, since the pandemic began, has just added a whole expanded range of connection and interaction between the community members. And that makes me wonder, what do you think the Urantia community might do to prepare for a magisterial mission?
Now, here's where I'm switching into something that would really be the way I think about it, but I think Carolyn affirmed that with me in our conversation today. The humanity, really understanding that we are truly partners with God, with deity, with the non-personal and the impersonal aspects of deity, with God, whom we call God as a personal reality, and by any name we choose, and by mother, by father, all of that. But that we are partners. We are truly partners in this moment. Every moment we're in partnership, so that the divine will, the divine love that so pours forth incoming to us can be returned. And it is this individual human connection, every person, every woman, every man, every child, every being in human form, that connection is what we need the very most right now, every moment of this day, because of the challenges, because of the tremendous opportunities for progress that these challenging times present.
Well said, Barbara. Thank you. You know,
Yeah, go ahead.
well, that connection and that partnership can be so strong that it becomes, to a certain degree, irrelevant whether the mission is here in a visible physical form or not, because we can experience working with them hand in hand and the satisfactions of that either way.
Exactly. And that makes it much easier, I believe, to stay involved.
Uh-oh, where are we?
Bear with us for finding the second module.
Hit your escape button, Meredith, on the keyboard at the very top left.
Just a sec.
Okay.
From the share screen?
Yes, the big screen there, it said to exit the full screen mode.
You think we should press escape? I keep getting booted out of the share screen.
Okay, so if you should be able to click anywhere on your browser to activate it, and then hit the escape button in your keyboard, and that should pull you out of full screen mode on your browser. You can also try pulling your mouse up to the very top of your screen, and it will pull down the browser title bar, and that'll let you go out of full screen mode as well.
Oh,
Share your screen with me.
I'm putting on share screen.
Okay. Okay.
But it boots me out of the,
I'm gonna,
oh, I see. You want me to escape this. Hold on a second. Click to exit full screen.
hit your, there you go, you got it. Perfect.
There.
Okay.
I think we're home free.
Yep, looks good.
Thank you very much for your help, Alec.
Thank
You're
you.
so welcome.
I wanted to add the thoughts that came to my mind in preparing for this, and certainly Carolyn embodies all of those and showed it to me again today, even at 87 with many advanced conditions, is trust. I believe, in my experience over the decades with the Urantia teachings and the Urantia Revelation communities, that what we have, one is faith in afterlife. We simply know that we're going on and that we're part of this future, not just on our world, but in the whole universe. And not everyone feels it's so friendly. Not everyone feels it's so comfortable. It's what I've discovered. You know, if you ask someone, well, what do you think of the universe? Is it friendly? Surprising number of people are not all that comfortable with the idea, or with angels, for example, just talking about angels. I mean, there is a history on the planet, which is in our legends and even in some of our historic writings of literature and scripture, that we weren't always able to trust our, what I would call our planetary government, our seraphic planetary government. And I think that trust, and that trust in God, that trust in a higher power, that trust in deity. In my case, I work in science and trusting the energy controllers of our universe to keep gravity going. these it may sound strange, but one of my best friends who's a scientist really finds a great deal of comfort in the laws of physics, so that we can trust in a world that really has had good reason not to feel trustful at times of others, and even of God at times, through various historical experiences and teachings. So now that's one reason this era to me is so special, and why I'm so thrilled to be alive at this moment in human form, is because we can trust. And from trust then comes openness. And from openness then comes the partnership, comes the connection in love.
Beautifully said, Barbara. Thank you so much. I understand you to say that it's less some material step we need to take than it is an attitude of the soul and an attitude of faith and trust. That
always in the center, always in the heart, in the soul, in the eyes.
Byron Blitzos, and I have a few questions for you, Barbara.
Sure.
So let's proceed, and thank you for the. Byron Blitzos, and I have a few questions for you, Barbara.
Sure.
So let's proceed, and thank you for the earlier questions. I'm going to try to build on those answers and get into some new territory as well. So, and again, thanks for being here, because I mean, this is not easy to talk about in public these days. It's just so volatile and so many controversies. So again, thank you so much, Barbara. So I guess my first thing I wanted to ask is about the startling statement that Carolyn makes in her article. Again, we're talking about this article, Who Comes Next, that came out in 2008, and where Carolyn states that the Urantia book is not an end in itself. The primary purpose for sending a new revelation in book form is threefold, and number one in her list is to prepare our world for the arrival of a new paradise sun. So I was really surprised to see that. And the second one was to prepare our world for emergence from the quarantine. So there you have it, and I wonder if how you regard that statement that opens up her article.
Thank you so much for asking. I understand that if first one reads the book, I believe, very personally, for personal transformation and growth in the relationship to God as you see God, that we all have. And sometimes when people are reading the book, they're primarily focused on personal transformation, which is, as we left off, the center of all of this. And then to expand out, some people are not as interested in studying some of the front parts of parts 1, 2, and 3. So this kind of leads me to a part of the Urantia book that people listening to our interview may not have really been drawn to yet. I think when you first start reading, you're drawn to the most important things for yourself, and then as you develop your own sense of purpose in life, and this would be purpose of a revelation, and you begin to sense how you develop purpose and how you fit into larger purposes, then you might tend to go to the parts of the book that are most interesting from that standpoint. So I'm trying to bring in readers who have all backgrounds.
Yeah.
There are people who have studied and enjoyed the Urantia Revelation for a lifetime who really are not interested in, for example, this concept of the next paradise son, or how having read the very front parts of the book for many years myself and been drawn to them, it seems only natural for me to think about the next paradise son because of the planetary mortal epics, which brings us to how this revelation is not only leads us into higher auto revelation, meaning for ourselves all the time, but how we have periodic epical revelation and forward progress all the time in the world. That's the question many people ask today. They say, isn't the world moving backward? Aren't we, because of these problems we face, doing worse than we were 100 years ago? But the fact is, when you look at the whole picture of our planet and certainly the universe, there's this constant age-long progression. So this question about the next paradise son might come surprising to those who follow Jesus' life as a paradise son, as a Michael creator son, as we call it in the Urantia book, or the paradise son of the Father as he introduced himself to our planet only 2,000 years ago. You might say, well, gosh, we just had one. I mean, when would the next paradise son come? So then it just becomes a great exploration of what's next, which is kind of how Carolyn got her idea for the title, I think, who's coming next. So just to put that into quick context, after a paradise bestowal son come the ages of light and light. If you read the normal progression of a normal planet, which is paper 52, this is what happens on a normal world. So it's normal to keep expecting visitations from the paradise son. Right. However, Jesus was the first visitation for our planet of a paradise son. And at a certain point in evolution, very early and still very primitive in ways, compared to light and life, every planet in Michael's universe, all 10 million worlds, get a bestowal son. Most of those bestowal sons, all of them except ours, are avenal sons. And you can read about those again in their own section in Paradise Sons in the earlier part of the Urantia book. But only one planet, ours, 1 in 10 million, receives a paradise creator son as our bestowal son. And in the future of light and life, which he began for us, our long journey to light and life 2,000 years ago, we will have many magisterial sons. We will have many avenal sons coming to help us. And this is where the fun begins, is to begin to realize that whenever we need one, a paradise son either is here working with us now. I believe that. I believe they were part of the beginning of this new bestowal age from the start, from the time Jesus made his bestowal mission. This future was opening to us, unbeknownst to us, perhaps unrealized. But I see evidence that there have been teachers and leaders spiritually who are aware of this great ongoing coming of paradise sons. So to me, it's not a surprise, but I can see how if that had not been part of the vision that you were led yet to see, that it just might seem unusual.
So in summary, you agree really that the Urantia text is not primarily, the third, she said it was threefold purpose for the text, and the third one was about spirituality, higher consciousness, higher thinking, cosmic consciousness, spiritual perception. So that's subordinated to the purpose being like a manual. Actually, that's my next question. Is it like a manual, as she actually states elsewhere on page 10, where she says, it's like a training manual for those who will assist the next son. And, you know, I honestly have not thought of it that way over the years until recently. We've been entertaining the idea that there is a magisterial mission and that we have a certain duty to that, but that's a lot of other things that we're doing. But this is a little different. This is saying it's central for students of the UB. So just to kind of hone in that a little bit more, is that really, you know, because it's not something that pervades the Urantia movement right now, that we're in prep for a magisterial mission, you know, that we're got a manual, that we think of it different. I've always thought of it different. So wonder
Well, how did you think of it, Var? Not to turn the interview on you, but
well, you know, generally, you know, I mean, in study groups and everything, we, you know, sort of, we think of it as this is a big information truth book on what it's all about, and what, you know, the history of the planet and what we're doing here and the afterlife, and, you know, we don't really know about the afterlife from the Bibles and or, you know, what really happened when Jesus was here. So it's just full of great information and knowledge and truth, right? So it's really to kind of correct. Actually, where I'm at now is it's here to correct Christianity. That's a pretty different thing, you know. But I currently, that's kind of my notion, since I'm studying, you know, theology right now. I see where it's correcting, you know, the Bible and theology. So no, I hadn't really thought of it that way. I thought of it as like something special that's happening now because of the planetary ecological crisis, etc. That it's just for the moment that we need somebody to come and offer us a personal helping hand. So that's my view. So let's turn it over to you on how would you?
Yeah. You know, this is a really good question, and not one I've raised. Well, all of these questions are new, and this is my first interview on any of these. I would say it this way, Byron. I came in when I was 17 with my parents, but it was only 10 years. The book had been out 10 years. Less than 10,000 copies have been sold.
Yeah. So
what happened for us was unique. In 65, even sooner than some of the current, my generation. I was pretty young. Okay, so here's the way it worked. If you were in the forum, and I knew so many who were in the forum, I want to say this is more than just Carolyn's view. And I can document that with historical records. Chicky Harries would be a good example of someone that was a great friend of mine who would understand this purpose of the book. We used to talk about it a lot together, or some others. Certainly Tom Kendall, her husband, whom I worked with at Urantia Foundation. We had a different view, I believe, because the older members of the forum were passing on, and they were giving us this viewpoint. So, for example, a lot of the historical verification that I've done is with Tom and Carolyn's materials. They're a few years older than I am. And so we were in slightly different generations, but the forum members and Christy as a contact commissioner was still alive and would make a point of making sure we had this viewpoint.
Really?
And I think to some degree there was a period of time where we kind of lost that. If that makes any sense to everybody. I'm kind of giving a broad swath of different focuses in the Urantia communities, as I would call it, as it grew and developed. And part of that is it just hasn't been documented and shared, which is one reason I became so interested in making sure that we preserve and record history, which includes this interview. I'm prepared to say some things today that I've carefully authenticated in history with independent sources, but that I personally experienced myself. And I just want to say it's not just me and Carolyn. I would say many others in the forum really understood. Here's what's interesting, not only that this is a training manual for being of service right now on Urantia, this is a training manual for those who are already on the mansion rolls to keep working on behalf of Urantia. Now that's really the shocker. I mean, if you want to get motivated, knowing that will keep you going when you're kind of a lazy human like me. And I'm thinking, well, you know, I don't know just how much I want to accomplish on this world, but I'm thinking of what I want to do on the mansion walls. Mm-hmm. Because I full well know that Dr. Sadler and Lena Sadler and Bill Sadler, they were the young ones. That occurred to me today. You know, Bill and Christy were the first set of young people to come in. to have this knowledge passed on. So there's very much a generational passing of knowledge that's going on and has gone on through several generations now. It just depends on where you were and who you talked to, but we need to make it possible for everyone to have the information, where you don't have to just visit with people you might have known who were in the forum, that sort of thing. That's where we are right now, I think.
So I'm a little stunned, and pleased actually to hear that even Christy being part of the contact commission, that even Christy thought that this is correct, that the book is here to prepare ourselves for a new Paradise Sun, right? I mean, and many in the forum thought that. Just to summarize what you're saying.
Well, and what I would say is, I would say not everyone would agree with exactly when and how. I mean, Carolyn's perspective is how she would see it and imagine that this could happen. And I'm very taken by what our Chief of Seraphim says. It would appear that, so much of this is a dynamic process. What I do have faith in is the teaching that magisterial sons come in waves for the Trinity teacher sons, to prepare the way for the Trinity teacher sons. I mean, we're way past a normal planet.
Right.
In terms of the breadth of diversity of, very primitive beings yet on our planet to those who are looking toward light and life. I mean, it's a huge diversity.
Okay.
Yes, they all saw the book as preparation, not just for service on your rancho, but for service on the mansion worlds when we leave. They wanted to develop groups of mortals, humans like us, that would serve Michael's purpose on this planet for a long time.
And continue in the afterlife, so that the text is read up there. So,
yes.
And then it's somewhat focused on the new Sun, Paradise Sun, coming our way as a manual, training manual. So what Hey Meredith, it's Byron. We're about 30 minutes in.
Is my understanding is to go into Light and Life. You can read about this in some of the papers on that, and about the Avenal Sons. They work in teams, they work in groups. So it makes sense to me that there's an Avenal leader, a magisterial son leader. And it makes sense to me that this would be one of those steps of progress, primarily because of the progress that was made among the Melchizedeks. So that leads me up to something that Carolyn and I wrote about in the paper we did for the Herald in 2010. We referred to the personal region of Makaventa that was appointed in 1950, and then shared communications that are of historical record, 1951 and 1952, which I have here in case you need to refer to them. Which were the last communications through the human subject who transmitted the Urantia book. So, but they were the formal communications. So all of that is in the book. What isn't in the Urantia book would be the 1950 arrival of Norsen. And his name is Norsen, and some people know that, but it's not very well shared. It's not part of the Urantia book. So that to me lays the foundation for the pattern of the Melchizedeks having more Melchizedeks on the ground, so to speak. That's what Carolyn has always called it. Makaventa wanted, as we made progress and as the adjudication was taking place, Norsen's messages kept us up to date. But that again was through that atypical communication through the human subjects that's described in the Urantia book. This was one of his messages and communications. The communications from 1952 forward have been of a different nature than that. And so it doesn't surprise me that pattern was established. Hey, because the forum asked, well, should we change the book? Should we change and add Norsen to the book? And they said, no. it's not changing your seraphic planetary government. We're just adding a member of your planetary government. We're adding to what you have in paper 114. You see how that goes?
Yeah.
But again, it led people in the forum to be expecting more, you know, or me as someone coming in young and hearing all this stuff to fully say, well, sure, we might get news of a magisterial son. We might learn of more that's happening. I expect it, as this chief of seraphim does, any day, any hour. That's my favorite quote from the chief of seraphim. I mean, live like that, okay?
Okay.
You know, Norson came. He's been helping us as a Melchizedek on the ground.
On the ground.
Yeah, and on the planet. When we say on, meaning, so why not? I guess that's my thing. Why not a magisterial son right here on the planet, coming along in progression, gradual progression?
Well, thank you, Barbara. I'm going to stop there and
Hello, Byron.
yes.
We are a little long on Barbara's clip, but the next clip with Bays is a little short,
Okay.
as are a couple of the other speakers. So I think it's all going to come out in the wash if you can be patient.
Oh, I will. Please carry on. Hi, everybody, we're back again. This is the third module in our interviews series with Barbara Newsom, and I'm delighted now to turn the baton over to Dave Tenney, who has a set of even more advanced questions to follow up. So Dave, over to you.
Okay, part 3. Well, this has all been very interesting, Barbara, and appreciate your comments. One of the questions that I had was in Carolyn's article, she mentioned UB quotes about the Urbano sons on the magisterial missions sometimes being incarnated invisible or not incarnated and invisible when repeated missions occur. And I'm wondering if that kind of fits in with your earlier comments about magisterial sons coming in waves. But could you speak more to that point of whether it's possible for the coming magisterial son in particular to be invisible or perhaps visible in a merantial form or
Yes.
visible?
The answer is just yes. I think that their versatility of form fits with a planet's need at the time. So if there's a need for a material appearance and a purpose that would serve us well, this goes back to trust. I've learned to really trust our seraphic planetary government, who are local to our local universe. But now we're talking about how they work with the Paradise Sons who are preparing and coming here and are already here, I believe. It's only natural. That's my belief. It's only natural for them to be here. I did want to follow up on that because we left off our second module about that. I do believe that it only makes sense for a magisterial son mission to be on the planet, so to speak, within our planetary daily seraphic meetings, for example, that take place every day at noon at the planetary pole. That's described in the Urantia book. I mean, these are the Paradise Sons who are working with us, just as we have the authors of the papers of Part 1 who came from Paradise to give us this revelation. It's ongoing. It's ongoing. When the book was published, I believe we returned to what I call normal communication, which is all of these things. I mean, if we need a midwayer who takes a material action known or unknown to us, we can trust that it's being taken. If we are best relating to our Morantia soul and our Morantia insight and Morantia communication as we're all attempting to improve in those regards, great, it will happen. That's my belief. That's my trust.
Mhm.
And if we need an appearance suddenly of a magisterial or a Melchizedek or a Midweyer, we'll have it.
Okay, and that could be, so currently they may be here in invisible form, but possibility of a formal form coming.
Yes, and I think the Urantia book in the papers themselves describe this, what I call normal way of communicating with a planet who's isolated. That goes back to my point about misunderstanding isolation and getting a better insight. We have limited communication or contact, not the normal communication and contact, but we were never completely isolated. That's an impossibility. God simply doesn't work that way. The isolation was to protect others, to keep others safe, but to do everything possible to help us. And I believe that that has happened from the moment of the rebellion, the starting of it, to the present. We just have more information about what may be transpiring that we might be open to being a part of.
Okay, thank you. Another question I had, that maybe you've already partially answered that, but I was intrigued by Carolyn's reference to paper 72 and the narrator suggesting the magisterial son could come to a neighboring planet despite having one nation being ready for a magisterial mission, despite having only one nation being ready. And wondering what your own perspective is about Urantia's readiness, or at least part of our world being ready. And so perhaps you could say just a little more about that.
I think that's the most important thing we're working on right now, those of us who are alive, is to be ready as possible for that.
Okay.
I might have given kind of a short answer there, but what I'm showing in this is just, to me, what is a logical progression, and how I trust our planetary government to be doing everything possible if we will just accept it. If we will just accept the love and the care and the assistance that's flowing into us. They need us. I would say Carolyn and I would both agree with that. They need us. And that's part of modern spiritual theology and just about every world religion that I'm working in interfaith is this insight that God needs us. We need God. Many people believe that, but God needs us. That's what Carolyn was talking about bringing the humanity into this process. Now that we know about the celestials, let's not stay arm's length from them. Let's embrace this experience and be open at any moment for anything that would help us. I mean, we are absolutely, totally unafraid of celestial contact, period. I mean, it's just not in our nature, having grown up the way we did with the Urantia revelation. We can't be. It's impossible to have that fear. It's just bring on more. Because we trust the group process, remember, and that would be one thing I wanted to emphasize, the teamwork of the magisterial sons and the Trinity sons, the Trinity teacher sons. You know, the Urantia book, page 215, I use page numbers because they're easy to remember in the original book. Page 215 describes the method of the Urantia revelation, which is from the Trinity teacher sons, even higher than the magisterial missions. They use that method. And we can just learn and grow every day in it. That is the method of the training manual, is the Trinity teacher sons method of revealing truth. And that's part of who directed the paradise beings who came here for part one. I always ask people who was giving them their mandates, the Trinity teacher sons, in their wisdom for how to educate a planet, how to move a planet along.
Okay.
Barbara, I just want to thank you for your generous gift of your time. You know, not all of us were lucky enough to be there in Chicago at the outset of so many of these events. And your information is priceless and only enhanced by your personal reflections. So thank you so much. And next, I want to proceed to a clip by Robert Sarmast. I'm sorry Barbara's clip ran long. It was very hard to cut any of it because I found it so enjoyable. Robert Sarmast is the author of Discovery of Atlantis and has led 2 expeditions to the site of Eden Atlantis and is founder of YourAnswerReligion.com. The reason why Bayes came to mind when we were hunting for speakers is because of his seminal article published in the Fellowship Herald in 1999 titled Magisterial Missions, in which he pulls out facts from the Urantia book that are there but hidden, not obvious, and comes to the conclusion that we are due for a magisterial mission and that may include a visible magisterial sun along with 12 visible Melchizedek receivers. Just a remarkable piece of writing. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to pick it up and take a good look at it. You'll find it on the fellowship website, YourAntiaBook.org. And that was published in 1999 in the Fellowship Herald. So here's Bayes. Do you think the summertime of a new visitation does draw near? And if so, why?
Yes, I definitely do. That quote, can be interpreted in various ways. I have another section of the book that's a lot more clear to me. Although that, the quote you said is also, if you think about it, there's never been a generation in the history of humanity where evolutionary religion was in such rapid retreat, where so many people, because of science, because of modern knowledge, because of information sharing, these old-time religions have become, for increasingly large number of people, they've become not viable, not something they can accept. So this amazing shift in consciousness is huge. And then when you think about how much life has changed in the last 100 years compared to the last 500,000 years, I mean, it's just incredible. So something is definitely here. The other quote is, again, another instance where the Urantia book speaks indirectly. It says things in a way that's not so obvious. Let me give you an example. This sentence goes that when the full fruition of the age has been reached, my Father will send an enlarged and enhanced revelation of truth and a demonstration of righteousness. That's a pretty, I'm sure that's pretty close. I've read that sentence so many times. It's saying, when the full fruition shall be reached, the next and the enlarged revelation shall come. And of course, what is it talking about? Itself. So, but it's not saying it. And then if you turn that sentence around, something even more interesting comes out of it. That when this enhanced and enlarged revelation of truth comes, that's the full fruition of the age. You see what I'm saying? That's so important. And again, it's put in their marvelous, clever, subtle technique of hiding things they don't want in the open and yet telling anybody who really wants to know. Remarkable. So based on that, and then based on also what we see in the world with our own eyes. I mean, you don't need to know the Urantia book to understand that our world is interconnected, interwoven, interrelated, and yet you have fatal flaws of nationalism, racism, sexism, and other issues that can't possibly withstand this new world that's coming. This new world is connected. Even if you don't believe that we're all part of one, you're going to experience it whether you like it or not, because the world is one. Somebody sneezes in China, our financial system crumbles here. This is not the world that has ever existed in history. It's totally new. So when you put all these together and then you see the crumbling that's happening right now, do you watch the news? I mean, it's kind of clear. It's breaking down. Society is breaking down because it's progressed a lot in a material way, but it's actually regressing in a spiritual way. So just because you have technologically advanced, selfish people that are really good at pursuing their own selfish interests, that's not really all that interesting. That's just a more efficient kind of a person we don't really want in society. So anyway, these were some of the things I've been thinking lately.
You know, the last time we spoke, Robert, you mentioned 2 criteria which you felt were critical to the coming of a new visitation. One was the dying of the light of truth on a planet, and another, I think, was that crisis circumstances, the planet in a critical situation. Can you speak to that?
Yes, well, you know, we have explanations in the Urantia book itself about why these previous visitations happen. Okay, so the first one 500,000 years ago was the Kalagasha revelation, and that was, we're told, a time of evolutionary growth for humanity. So it was something biological. And then after that, we had the Adamic, and that happened, you know, Van, we're told, could foretell that it's coming based on certain evolutionary things that were happening in the masses surrounding him. So he knew as well exactly when that happens during that evolutionary path that a species, a human species, takes. And that's exactly what happened. That's when they came. So that was something also that was whatever, biological or spiritual. It's usually some kind of a combination. And then we had the Melchizedek, which was unique in that there's nothing mentioned, but it was that the light of truth itself was in danger. So religion, spirituality, truth-seeking were dying. You know, nobody was interested. And then we had Jesus, who came, we're told, when the conditions were ripe for him to flourish, for the word to flourish. And humanity was extremely interested in the truth, wanted to know the truth. So it was some kind of an evolutionary thing again. And what these facts elucidate is that it's our timing that affects their actions, not vice versa. They come according to our schedule of growth or the lack of it. They're there to sort of moderate, this growing being without too much interference, but not let it go off the rails. So anyway, sorry, something popped up and I lost my train of thought.
Well, I think you've done a wonderful job of answering my question and of pulling this information out of the Urantia book in astute ways. You know, you have been a thinker on the forefront of the question of a magisterial mission for 20 years. And as we head into 2020 here, I wonder if you have any other thoughts that you think it would behoove the Urantian community to consider about a magisterial mission at this time.
Absolutely. I think that we should be, maybe not completely, but at least partially, responsible for sending a message, a new and expanded gospel of Jesus based on the Urantia book. That's only possible because of the Urantia book, to a starving world. We need to give them the light in a way they can understand, in a beautiful way. But let's not forget, our religion is gorgeous. Our Creator is unparalleled. The saving grace that we can provide is unmatched. And the reaping that we can do it doesn't come along very often. This is huge. We can represent the Heavenly Father to a starving world and tell them that each and every one of them was personally created by the same divine being that created the entire universe.
Thank you, Bays. I so appreciate his time and his interest. And now we're going to take a break so everyone can get up and stretch. It'll last for 7 minutes. And we're putting some music on in the interim. When the music ends, you know we'll be restarting. Music courtesy of Peter Tchaikovsky. The piece is titled Hymn of the Teraphim. Byron, take it away when you're ready.
Okay, Mayor, we're ready to go.
We're ready.
Okay, everybody, we're calling you back. You may be in the next room, but please return, and I'm going to start here very shortly. Just by way of introduction, I wanted to, well, not introduction, but actually by way of gratefulness. I'm grateful to all of you for being here. I'm grateful to my co-host, Dave and Mayor, for doing this. Really grateful to our speakers who really went out on a limb so far in public to say such things that, you know, even a few years ago people weren't talking about, but now we're talking about it. So everybody ready? So two Melchizedeks and a Avonal son walked into a bar, and guess what they said to one another? Well, we don't know yet because they haven't come to Earth. So just hang in there. We're going to find out what they said. So this is kind of a story that's unfolding. And, you know, we have to have a little bit of lightness about it, lightness of being, because actually this is an extremely hopeful future that's ahead of us, but we have a kind of a rough patch to go through here for the moment. Now, what I'd like to do is kind of do some setting of context and doing some history, going way back to look at contact on planet Urantia. And so I'm going to bring up a series of slides, and hopefully they come up, and here it is. Does everybody see? Oh, wrong slide. Okay. Get out of that one. Try again. There we go. Well, it's coming up with the wrong slide again. Please bear with me. Well, folks, I'm getting the wrong slide, even though I hit the right slide. So maybe I should hit the wrong slide and see what happens. No, it's not coming. Well, we're having fun, folks, and anybody have a good joke? We got you all muted, so I can't hear your jokes. Why is my slide not coming up? Bear with me. There we go. Can you see this? It says eschatological redeemers. Yes? You see that, Mary and Dave? Okay.
Yes.
All right, very good. So I wanted to kind of show off a little bit my my recent education in theology, history, religion, and so this is this big word they use, eschatological, having to do with the future. And eschatological redeemers are not a new thing in the history of religion. So first of all, Christ was seen as a redeemer, an eschatological redeemer, at the time that he came to earth. In addition, Judaism, of course, has a redeemer they call the Messiah. Of course, many Jews are still looking for him. So for them, there is a current search for a future redeemer. I was amazed and fascinated to find that Islam has a redeemer of the future that they expect, and he is known as the Mahdi. And if you want to have some fun, look up Mahdi. There's quite a lot of interesting images and things that not from the Quran so much, but from the Hadith, which is their secondary scripture. And then in particular in Buddhism too, we have the notion of the Maitreya, and that's mainstream Buddhism, the Maitreya being the future Buddha. And there's an image there of the future Buddha. And you can see these in any museum, and quite a lot of them, including quite a few sculptures I've seen in museums around the country of Buddhist art. So there you have it. It's very important. Aspect of what we're talking about is that many other religions are looking for a future redeemer, a savior, or a teacher who will incarnate. It's not just that there'll be something ethereal or celestial, but actually a presence of a being who will come to earth. So it's a thought by some of us that the eschatological redeemer notion, all of it is one thing. It's being given to the different religions in such a way that it's in their vernacular. And so it would strike me that this will be translated for each of the different cultures into what they expect to see. So let's proceed from there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing because once again, we've got, looks like the wrong slide. That's the old version. So let's get the new version up here. The old set of slides. And now we got that one coming up. And here we go. bear with me. You know, I was thinking about the quarantine of our planet. And it's like they put a big mask over planet Earth. That's an image that came to me. Sorry, it's a kind of an odd image. Well, so eschatological redeemers, we've covered that. And here's a nice image of Christ, of Jesus returning in the modern age. You can see a lot of really good art of the return of Christ. So continuing, next slide here is just the notion that there's been a long history of celestial contact in the on planet Earth, and we've had thousands of years of contact with all races of humankind. I want to highlight in particular the Hebrew contacts, starting with Abraham, of course, who met with Macaventa, but the reappearance in the celestial via celestial contact of teachings through the prophets, starting with Moses, and of course Moses, received a massive sort of download in his contact with the burning bush and then beyond that. So it's not that this is all that unusual at all. And we need to note that. Just want to make sure, folks, that these slides are looking good, or they look okay to you. Moving on. We've had 100 years of contact in the Urantia movement. So thanks to Barbara Newsom, we've been alerted that in the forum and in the contact commission, there was significant celestial contact. We all knew that, but there's new details coming out. And what I think, as a amateur historian, is that the Urantia movement features 3 contact phases. So phase 1, in my understanding, is 1910 or so or earlier, up until the completion of the Urantia papers. And then after that, and even in the 50s, that Barbara mentioned that there was contact with the Celestials that indicated that Norsen was joining the planetary hierarchy. So we've had contact really up to the time of the publication of the Urantia book. And there was also what I would call an anomalous contact with Vern Grimsley. And I'm noting that because it really has a lot to do with what's happening now in the Urantia movement. That was 1983. Those of you who don't know about this, Vern was a very prominent person in the Urantia movement who received midwayer contact allegedly stating that there would be a nuclear war, 1983. That caused a lot of problems in our movement. So we'll refer back to that. So phase 2, in my view, is 1987 to the present. Now this is controversial, folks. We all know that there's been some issues around these claims of contact, beginning with the first bullet there, that there has been the claim that there was the adjudication of the Lucifer Rebellion. This is something that has been, contested in many quarters, and it's pretty hard to pin this down. But in multiple locations, folks who were Urantia book students were told this through their contacts, that this occurred in the mid-1980s. Going to the next bullet there, I'll read these bullets to you. Since around 1991, there has been up to 6,000, actually more than 6,000 transcribed lessons presented in over 50 locations. And the teaching mission was the initial name of this contact. And but technically the teaching mission was the first few years in which there was training of a large number of Urantia groups through celestial contact of a spiritual nature, personal spiritual training. And in my view, and I think it's been stated clearly, that the larger aspect of this is called the correcting time. The correcting time is the planet-wide uplift that occurred after the alleged adjudication of the Lucifer Rebellion, excuse me. So once we had the re-encircuiting of the planet, again, claimed to be the case. Then you could have the correcting time, where there was an outpouring of support to every culture, every race, all people of a new kind, because energetically the planet that took the mask off, you might say, and the quarantine was being relaxed over this last decades. And we call that the correcting time. And one evidence of that is the collapse of communism right after that, in the late 1980s, was the taking down of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War. So I think that's a very strong indication that something was happening on the planet that was extremely significant because of the buildup of atomic, of nuclear weapons for a feared nuclear war. But there's many other indicators of that, such as the massive upsurge of other contacts, rampant claims of channeling, things like Course in Miracles and all sorts of angelic contacts in the 1990s. As a publisher, I saw multiple manuscripts of people talking about contacts with angels or with near-death experience. Fourth bullet there is just reminding some of you and some that do not know that the archives of the teaching mission are at these two links. The more comprehensive one is dialogues.danel.org, and a newer one, also well done, is called bigmacspeaks.life. And both of them have, the first of the two is extremely comprehensive and not as easy to navigate, but Big Mac Speaks is quite easy and accessible. I wanted to just call attention quickly to the fact that the contacts that have occurred in the so-called teaching mission have never, no one has ever claimed to be infallible like the Pope. And that's really not a feature of what we do. We always note, or we should note, that there's human error in any mind-to-mind contact from celestial beings to human beings. We've also noticed a possibility of what you might call cultism, where there's a person who's charismatic, has celestial contact, and sometimes that might go off the rails. There's a particular group in Pennsylvania that claims to be the exclusive representatives of the magisterial mission. They have something called the Magisterial Foundation, and in this particular group, we are not connected with them. The so-called Magisterial Foundation, which has lately claimed that the Supreme Being has gone into default, and that there's been a recent seraphic rebellion on planet Earth, and things like this, which we consider to be, the extremely implausible. And also, we can't at all accept that there's a single point of contact, because the whole point of the correcting time, and the whole point really of a magisterial mission, is that there are points of contact throughout the planet to all cultures, not just to sort of white middle class people in Pennsylvania or anywhere else, but with all people in different forms. We've also noted there's been governance problems in the teaching mission group that we're working on all the time, and trying to put our resources together to prepare for the magisterial mission. I would note quickly that these claims have been misunderstood in the mainstream Urantia movement. I think there is a reconciliation going on right now that I'm very hopeful about. And you can see that in the fact of the folks who are willing to speak to us, even in this summit, who have not been participants in the ostensible correcting time teaching mission. So there's really a turnaround, I think, coming. I did want to note very briefly also, Timothy Wiley has had another form of anomalous contact that I find to have been quite significant, and just to note that. So what I'm calling phase 3 is what you might call the magisterial mission, and that seemed to begin, from what I could experience, in 2003, when in Niagara Falls there was a rather large meeting of teaching mission adherents, And we had our first kind of real public contact with the magisterial son, the alleged Vonal son, who gave a very significant introduction to himself. It seems that there have been over 500 lessons presented in over 10 locations. This is just an estimate, that are specifically having to do with the magisterial mission. And many of these are from the alleged Vonal son, whose name is Monjoronson or Monjorensen. I find personally, this is just for me, Daniel Raphael's work along this line has been very significant. Most of these lessons from the magisterial son have come through Daniel Raphael, who's really been a great servant to this work. But there's a number of others, and some who are actually on with us today, who've had significant contacts. We also know there's been contacts worldwide, at least we've been told in transmissions, that the Dalai Lama had a significant contact with the Vonal son, and there was some indication that he made to Buddhists that he had a contact with Padmasambhava, which is one version of the future Buddha. So that's something to note, and I would assume that other religions have had other kinds of contacts of this sort. So moving right along, I want to suggest for you a set of tenets of the magisterial mission. This is just my own work. This is not representing anyone but my own view of this based on many years of research that I've done. And here are some quotes, and you'll notice that these are quotes that come from 2015 or further back. I mean, we've been hearing these things really since about 2003 or earlier, and we have quite a large record of these statements. So these are excerpts from 10, 15-page transcripts. So the first tenet, according to me, is what will occur is a judgment, but it's mercy saturated judgment. And this will terminate our current dispensation. And here's a quote from Machiavelli, this is through Daniel Raphael, that says, "We are now setting the stage for the healing of your world, which will be the preparation needed for Monjorensen's arrival. And then after that, the arrival of Christ Michael. Whether this is 1 decade or 1 millennium depends on the decisions of the mortals." And as Barbara Newsom was saying, a lot of it has to do with our own desire, our decisions, and I would say our activism. Notice that he's saying here that it's Monjorensen's arrival and then followed by Christ Michael's second coming. So this is a beautiful, beautiful notion. Now we have something that is not easy to say in public, but these are the statements of which there are very, very many that we've received, that there will be social chaos coming forward in this period, which we're now seeing. And just reading this is approximately 25 years of social chaos in front of you. A crescendo of natural phenomena will have tremendous impact upon your world, not the least of which are the probable pandemic or 2 or 3 that may occur in succession. So that was stated by Machiavelli Melchizedek in 2015, but they began saying this to us in around 2006 in a series of statements that have really caught my attention as a kind of prophecy for what was coming. So once COVID began 2 months after we started our work with this, so it was an interesting serendipity of a sort that now we see these changes really accelerating. I wanted to alert number 3 here to all of you about Serena, revealed to us as the chief of staff of the magisterial mission, who's female, unrevealed order from Uversa. She's chief of staff. Here's a really significant statement. She said, in 2015. Rest assured that all this proceeding is Michael Monjorensen and the planetary spiritual hierarchy has planned all along, and that we will enable the creation of expanding centers of light that will increasingly connect with one another, forming a growing web or a gridwork of light, which will be required in order for a momentum or a critical mass to be reached that will allow the planet to be effectively prepared for the advent of the new magisterial age, which is even now in the process of dawning upon many areas of Urantia. However, great preparation and mobilization of light forces shall be required to bring about those events, which will give way to the full materialization of Monjorensen and his personalized staff of Melchizedeks, as well as those of my order and others not yet revealed. So we're talking about full materialization, including the 12 Melchizedek receivers will be materializing. Finally, some notes about the mission known as the social mission that is central to the magisterial mission, as I understand it. Others have other interpretations, but this is based on many transmissions, mainly from Daniel Raphael. It says, Monjorensen says, my work has to do with social programs and social institutions of your world. It is more specific. This is more specific than the teaching mission, which dealt with spiritual health, emotional well-being. So the Urantia book is a reference text. Things like the teaching mission are a platform of spiritual well-being, spiritual health, emotional healing. On that platform, then comes the connections, or what Serena was talking about, is the centers of light. And then those will emanate such that there'll be enough folks ready to meet our magisterial son. It's been stated in a number of transmissions that one of the programs of the mission, magisterial mission, or the MM, is the 7 core values of social sustainability. And there are 2 layers of this. The first are the core value, the main core values, which is life, equality, personal growth, and quality of life. Now, try this exercise, just a little mental exercise. Imagine a situation where all 4 of these are present at the same time. If you had life, really ecological health, everybody living a full life, if you had equality, if you had everybody growing, and if you had a high quality of life, all in one place at the same time, that's a kind of utopia. So that to have those all at the same time means that you're socially sustainable. And social sustainability is what Light and Life is about. In the concrete, on the ground sense, these things have to be present. So the lessons we're going to be taught will make this possible, make these things happen at the same time. Notice that equality is really the Black Lives Matter movement and things of that sort, the Me Too movement. These have to do with the population of the earth of aspiring for equal rights and equality of gender and race and class. And so equality is critical right now. And only in certain enclaves do we see quality of life and real significant personal growth. So then later lessons came to say there are secondary core values. And those are empathy, compassion, and love for humanity. So I note that briefly, and you're hearing more about that in future work that we're doing. I wanted to end with this statement that was, and this beautiful image that I found of Mother Spirit. Monjorensen's mission is one of mercy, of inspiring and encouraging you to embrace the true past of your races, and having the courage and the generosity to forgive yourselves. This is especially true for those cultures and nations of people who've been fighting each other for thousands of years now, to forgive and embrace each other and not keep the endless cycles of revenge going. This is Monjorensen's mission, to inspire and encourage you to be like your father by valuing mercy This is greatly helped by an acceptance of the severe limitations of your own ability to judge one another in order to achieve justice. Ceasing the endless cycles of revenge is the only way, and this is Monjoranson's real living heart, his greatest desire. That was transmitted by Jerry Lane. So I'll leave you with that, and I thank you all for hearing me out, and I'll be returning to respond later on. Thank you all. So it's now my pleasure. Let's just take a breath, everybody. That was a lot. Couple of deep breaths, and let that sink in. These statements are, I think, profound. And but if you go to those websites, start doing some research, and shortly there'll be more books coming out about the magisterial mission with these transcripts. One of them I'll publish eventually. And we got a lot of homework to do. I am now honored to invite Donna D'Angelo, will be our next speaker. And Donna, I will need to unmute you. So Alec, if you could do that. Actually, I think I'm doing it. Donna, you have to unmute yourself, it seems. Are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Well, let me just give a quick introduction. Donna's a wonderful old friend of mine going way back to the 70s, and Donna has been an intrepid student of the Urantia Revelation and has gone into heroic work with celestial contact beginning in the early 90s, and has published 2 books. I'm actually the publisher of her books, Teach Us to Love and Divine Father, Divine Mother. And Donna's current work is with the Institute for Christ Consciousness. She'll tell you all about that and much more in her presentation. Take it away, Donna.
Thank you, Byron, and thank you everyone for being here and for being curious and open-minded about this very important development in our evolution toward light and life. I have been a student of the Urantia books since 1975, and it was in 1992 when I first heard about the celestial contact component of the Urantia Revelation, which we've come to know as the teaching mission. At first I was skeptical, but then I kept hearing about the practice of stilling one's mind to make contact with the indwelling spirit. And so I just kind of kept that in the back of my mind. And when I started to meditate and I had the contact with the teacher, I began to recognize that this is a real phenomenon and I needed to pay attention. So as I started to develop my own inner practice of quieting my mind, I was eventually able to make contact with my first teacher by the name of Wilmec, who was a marvelous, marvelous teacher and had many wonderful experiences with him. I was also very much interested at the same time as in terms of, the furtherance of the revelation, the Urantia Revelation, but interested in healing and different forms of energetic healing. And I studied a variety of modalities until I basically came to the conclusion what my spiritual teachers were telling me was that what this planet needed the most were doctors of the soul, people who could help people heal at a soul level. And so that really spoke to my heart. And it was in the early 2000s when I moved to California in the San Francisco Bay Area where Byron was living, that I started the Institute of Christ Consciousness to help people open to their indwelling spirits and also to develop more intimacy with Michael and Mother Spirit. I was receiving a lot of help from them at the time, and they basically told me in one of my stillness sessions to go into the subconscious part of my mind And they started giving me information about the Lucifer Rebellion and what happened to the planet in terms of our consciousness, our mindal structure, our mindal circuits, and how they had been corrupted by the rebellion. And I studied the Urantia book for a number of months to look for references to this. And one of the ones that really struck me was the reference, and I don't remember what paper it's in, but they make reference, the authors make reference to the fact that, with one exception, the adjutant mind spirits had a difficult time in making contact with our neurobiological chemical system, so that our minds and our bodies were not communicating as effectively as they should. One of the reasons and the factors was we did not get enough of the Adamic DNA. So it was around 2003, 2002, I started hearing the words generational healing. And I was told to look into the genetic structure of how memories are carried forth on a part of the gene strand called the epigene. And now there's a very developing science called epigenetics that has substantiated this. And so I was working with people energetically, long distance, to go into these areas of the mind-body system to help people unburden themselves of the trauma of the past. So it was around that same time that I had my first contact with Manja Ronson. I was at the conference in Niagara Falls in 2003, and I was very intrigued about the notion that we were now being assigned a wonderful avonal son to help us with our problems. And it was around that time that I first had my first intimate contact with him, wherein I felt his presence just kind of pulse in my heart, see his name. And what I've been told since then, this was kind of like a calibration to a personality signature. You might imagine that a spiritual being is operating at a high luminous spiritual frequency, and to downstep that energy to make contact with a human mind or human energy system takes a lot of calibrations. So over the course of the years, moving from the Center for Christ Consciousness, which I first developed in 2002 to help people open more to their intimate relationship with Michael and Mother, I also began to appreciate the fact that not only is the correction necessary at the individual level, but the correction of the planet's mindal system needs to happen in the collective. And Michael did indicate to me in an early experience with him in the 2000s that he wanted his children to come to know him. And I began transmitting a number of messages and holding a space for people to have their own experience with their wonderful, loving daddy, to really begin to feel that deep personal connection that we have to him. And over the course of the years since around the early 2000s to the present time, I've been collaborating with a number of celestial personalities to work with a group of individuals, mostly Urantia book readers. We started a group in 2010 to collaborate with the Seraphim and our magisterial son to build more circuits from the human end to foster more spiritual receptivity into the circuits of mind. This is ongoing to this day. It began in 2010, and in 2017 it shifted to working directly with the planetary Seraphim. And today we actually did one of our focused calls with our Seraphim today at noon. And the theme of today's topic was all about institutional change. Institutional change, that our Seraphim need our willingness to reform our institutions, and they can take that heart energy and move it into circuits of these aggregate thought forms that are on the planet to help us shift our value system, to move from the intellectual understanding to more of a heart-based society where we are loving and compassionate and understanding and forgiving. Now, one of the things that I learned in my relationship with Michael and Mother and Manja Ronson was that forgiveness is a very important component of our moving beyond the rebellion mindset and agenda. And that forgiveness of the rebellion is very fundamental for us to practice. Michael has forgiven the rebellion. And those individuals who did not accept Michael's proffer of mercy, we have understood that they have been annihilated. But what has been left on the planet is this residue of thought forms, aggregate thought forms, that are still mired in self-centeredness, greed, corruption, jockeying for position, dog-eat-dog kind of mentality. I believe this is all being outworked right now. And the evidence that I see out in our material culture is that these institutions that have long been ensconced in a rebellion mindset, by and large, are now breaking up. And they're breaking up in a two-way directional fold, that the celestial helpers are building more spiritual light, especially into those mindsets that are very ensconced in this rebellion, selfish, self-centered mindset. And what it's doing, it's shining light on all those places of darkness within our minds, within our hearts. And it's creating a lot of spiritual pressure. And the reason for that is that as a planetary culture, it is very important for us to understand what has happened here so we do not repeat the same mistakes over and over again, so we can move forward to achieving a light in life, a status as an evolutionary destiny. Now, this is a huge undertaking, and it is going to take a number of years, maybe, well, probably even centuries. But we are in a very concerted time frame where I believe, and this is what I've been told by Manja Ronson when I asked him, what exactly are you here to do? And the information that I perceived from him was that the planet is now in its adjudication phase. The rebellion was adjudicated at the system level, which apparently was completed sometime in the mid-'80s. And now the planet, not only this planet, but the other 36 planets that participated in the system rebellion, are going through their adjudication process. And what is happening now is this spiritual pressure is shining light on the corruption that we have been living in. And it's compelling people to choose. Do you understand? Do you recognize what is happening? Do you like this? Do you want to participate with this? Or do you want to change course? And a lot of spiritual energy has been applied into these very deeply, what you might call historical circuits of how the rebellion has been maintained over the evolutionary course of 250,000 years, to move into those deep historic circuits to begin to outwork this energy. And what I see in sessions when I work with the Celestials is they come in with Gabriel, and the archangels come in with massive frequencies of beautiful divine light. And they start shedding light on this, what you might call like toxic goo of mindsets that are very ingrained, not only in our planetary system of consciousness, but we are actually attached to that. And even though we may not feel that, there is a unconscious part of our energy systems, our mind-body systems, that still retain this residue. And they come in with light, and it starts to break up these dark blobs so that they can kind of be released in dark smoke and go up to Mother Spirit for her purposes of regenerating, recycling energy. So what is happening on the planet, I believe, is this intense period of adjudication. Now, I have no idea how long this is going to take. This is really up to us as humans if we want to participate. Do we want to awaken to the call of spirit within? But I believe that every effort is now being given to us by Michael, who loves this world, who wants us to succeed as a planetary culture, to have us as individuals have wonderful dynamic relationships with Father within. And that right now, this intense adjudication period is necessary for us to become better partners in the unfolding of the Supreme Being, not only the planetary Supreme Mind, but the growing Supreme Being in the collective, the grand design. So there's a lot of things that are going on now, and my work at the Institute of Christ Consciousness is both personal and collective, to work with individuals to help them open up to being reparented by Michael and Mother, who love you and know you better than your human parents loved you, or and may not have given you the love and the validation that you've needed to grow and thrive as a human being, to live your potential that the Father in Paradise has seeded within you. And then to work with the celestials at the collective level in these planetary seraphim calls, where we receive the information and we hold the space for our focus to go out into the planet as willing participants for these changes to be evoked in our circuits of mind. So it's a big deal turning a rebellion planet around, and it doesn't happen overnight, and it's going to be continuing for a while. Our stability is maintained in our relationship with our divine parents, Michael and Mother Spirit, and with our indwelling spirits, so that we can ride out this current storm with grace and dignity and faith and trust, and participate as individuals in feeding our brothers and sisters with love, with compassion, with understanding, and being responsible as cosmic citizens. This is really very important, that we are learning some important lessons of cosmic citizenship right here and now. And there's another point that I want to make before I close, and it just keeps wafting in and out, and I'm trying to capture that. And I go back to the Urantia book, where it talks about, in order to really know where you're going, you have to know your origin and your history. If you want to know what your destiny is, you have to look at your origin and your history. And our history is that of being a rebellion world. And one of the things that I've been taken into very deeply, and this has not been easy, because I have seen some hideous, dark things that these rebels did to distort how our minds work. But the good news is, this is all getting corrected now. And it's happening worldwide. Many light workers, not people just in the Urantia Revelation movement, are participating in building these circuits of light, so that this planetary system of consciousness, of mind, our minds, can be fed with better information. And then from that point, we have more receptivity to our indwelling spirits, and can perceive the inner voice with more conscious direction and guidance. So I'm just going to end it there. And if there's any other points, I know Meredith and you and I talked about this, and Dave talked about it before. So if there's anything that I missed, I'll be happy to pick it up. But I appreciate the opportunity to share my work with you. And if anyone is interested in joining our planetary seraphim calls, which are held on the 2nd and 4th Sundays of the month at 12 p.m. Eastern, please feel free to email me at donna@institutechristconsciousness.org. That's donna@institutechristconsciousness.org, and I'll be happy to put you on the mailing list. and you'll receive the written transcripts and an opportunity to participate with us. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you, Byron, Mayor, and Dave, for having this symposium. Very, very important.
Our big thanks to you, Donna. That was a fabulous presentation. We are so blessed to have you and the people you're working with who are doing something that struck me when I was in New York City with it was a library of 800,000 theological volumes, all collecting dust. And sometimes I would think of you, Donna, because you're bringing us into the present, into the energetics of what's happening now. And those books are collecting dust. And we need to come into this healing outpouring that is really setting the stage for the magisterial mission. And by the way, that bar that I mentioned earlier where the two Melchizedeks will walk into with the magisterials, that's in New York City. And New York City still hasn't heard about even the Urantia book. There's only one study group in New York City. But that bar is there, and they're going to walk in. And so I'm going to be talking soon about becoming an activist and making things move forward through our own intention, which we'll get to in the next segment. So I think that's it, right, Dave and Mayor? And we're going to take our break now. Is that correct?
No, Byron, I think that I'm speaking in.
Oh dear, sorry about that. I'm sorry there. One who needs no introduction, Meredith Tenney, beloved by all of us. She's got an important statement I thought it was in the third unit, but it's actually now. So hang in there, everybody. And Mayor, I'm just going to turn it over to you to take it away.
Thank you, Byron, and thank you, Donna. It is such a delight to be here today. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to take a moment to recap what we've heard so far. Barb tells us that from early on, the forum considered that a primary purpose of the Urantia book was preparation for a magisterial mission. That perspective has been recent years, and we are here today to reclaim it. If that theory is true, if the Urantia book is indeed a guidebook for individuals that will work with the magisterial mission, it explains a lot. For instance, why what has evolved over the last 40 years is not an exponential growth of readers, but rather a winnowing down to a core group of people who've had time to spiritually mature and are now ready to dedicate their lives to the revelation. This could explain why so many of us found the book in the same time frame around individuals to it, or even led to it, while the population at large remains largely uninterested. We are living in a rapidly changing world, and our beloved Blue Book, written, produced, received 100 years ago with the input of the forum, a group of individuals living in the 20s and 30s, is rapidly becoming outdated. The patriarchal language and racist sounding discussion of genetics are already a significant barrier to reaching the younger generation, and this is only going to get worse in the years ahead. I have to believe the Celestials would have foreseen the aging of the book ahead of time. Father knows the end before he begins, right? Which leads me to conclude that the UB may have been primarily designed to prepare people in a particular time and generation. If the book is actually meant to serve as a handbook for mortals who might potentially be willing to serve as members of a magisterial staff, why doesn't it say that directly? Instead of such a heady foreword, why not just start out with the opening sentence? This book is meant as a guide to prepare individuals to work with the magisterial mission. Although I do not know, I hypothesized that the revelators are hoping to attract spiritually curious and open-minded people, not those seeking positions of authority. As we know, even the apostles James and John Zebedee sought preferred positions in the kingdom, which is a common human failing. Maybe they wish to avoid that amongst magisterial mission workers. Bayes spoke to us of being aware of the signs of the times and noted that the historical criteria mentioned in the Urantia book that precedes other visitations are both present today. First, global crisis, and second, a dying of the light of truth on the planet. I don't think any one of us would debate that we are living in a time of global crisis. While empty pews in churches and synagogues around the world demonstrate a turning away from institutionalized religion and the loss of interest in the light on the planet. He also discusses the passage that states, "When the kingdom shall have come to its full fruition, be assured that the Father in heaven will not fail to visit you with an enlarged revelation of truth." Bayes says that the enlarged revelation of truth is obviously the fifth epical revelation, and tells us that as we have already received it, we know that the kingdom has come to its full fruition, and this leads to the inevitable conclusion that we must be at the start of a new dispensation. The rest of the quote goes on to say we will be given an enhanced demonstration of righteousness. This clearly refers to a new visitation, as the revelators go on to say, even as he has already bestowed upon this world the prince of darkness, and then Adam, followed by Melchizedek, and in these days the Son of Man. I find this a fascinating, revealing analysis of a passage that demonstrates Bayes' ability to tease facts from the Urantia book, revealing new truths. Byron has given us a historical context for the magisterial mission within our community and a cultural framework to discern how the magisterial son may be anticipated by multiple faith traditions around the globe. He bravely invites us to form communities of light and life and a welcoming committee for a magisterial mission. Donna has described her experience of personal revelation and connecting with the spirit of the magisterial son, and teaches ways of supporting the mission with spiritual energy through our thoughts, prayers, affirmations, and will. And now I'd like to share my personal reflections. When the testimony of the previous speakers is considered as a whole, along with the information in the Urantia book, along with personal revelatory experiences, and many transcripts over the years, it creates a convincing and credible argument for the potential arrival of a magisterial mission. We all know the story of the Magi, how three wise men, actually priests of Ur, were influenced by a dream to believe that the light of life was about to appear on earth in the form of a babe among the Jews. We are told that the three futilely sought the infant for weeks in Jerusalem and were just about to give up and head home when they ran into Zacharias, who sent them down to Bethlehem. Somehow they end up just at the right place at the right time in spite of their confusion, an experience I'm sure we've all had. This story tells us that wise, spiritually attuned men and women can, by personal revelation, learn of a visitation ahead of time. Previous sons of God who have visited Urantia have relied on mortals to help them achieve their goals. For instance, Abraham and the humans at the Salem School, with its subsequent missionaries, were central to Macaventa's plans. Jesus, too, depended on humans and his plan was apparently to rely on a core group of 12 apostles to carry his message to the world. Similarly, it seems likely that the magisterial son will need mortals to assist him when he arrives, humans who have opened their minds and hearts to him, humans prepared to acknowledge and receive him. If the first epical revelation was our planetary prince, the second was our material son and daughter, the third was Machavan and Melchizedek, and the fourth epical revelation was Michael, then it seems reasonable to assume that the fifth epical revelation heralds a new visitation, perhaps soon. We know not even the angels in heaven know the time and manner of the future appearances of Paradise Sons, but I am here to proclaim that I believe that the mission is coming soon and that we should be alert to the signs of the times and ready. Consider Van and Amadon. Some believe that Van was told by the Melchizedeks to prepare a garden, but the Urantia book does not document a formal mandate from on high. Van knew about the material sons and daughters from his time living in Jerusalem, and he was also aware of the conditions that needed to be in place on a planet to precede such a visitation. We know, too, that he was unsure about when Adam and Eve would actually arrive, and that he and his followers waited 87 years for their appearance. It was a cause of great disappointment when Van, not knowing how soon the expected son and daughter might come, suggested that the younger generation be trained to carry on just in case their arrival should be delayed. This caused great consternation and many desertions. But nevertheless, Van went forward. In 2008, I went on a vision quest, and wanting to be of service to our celestial administration, and inspired by Van and Amadon, I launched the Garden Project, an effort to rebuild the garden. For almost a dozen years, I and many others worked hard on that vision. We formed a 501c3, we labored over bylaws, we hosted planning conferences, held information sessions, and looked at property. Eventually, we identified a site and launched a fundraiser, raising $80,000 in pledges. I am forever grateful to all those who gave so generously of their time, money, and energy to make that happen. I'm proud, too, of the Urantia community for all the ways they supported the project and demonstrated a consciousness of universe citizenship. We did not end up with a physical site for the garden, but I believe that we were led by the Spirit of Truth, that Father knows the end before we begin, and that his purposes were served by our efforts. Preparing our hearts and minds to receive a magisterial mission may be ultimately much more important than establishing a geographic center. We are told that when Jesus was on the planet, 30% of the people believed in him. 30% thought he was beside himself, including his own family, and 30% just didn't know what to think. I hope that whenever the magisterial mission comes, we will do better than that. And I like to think the Garden Project helped to prepare us. Throughout more than a decade of striving to rebuild the garden, I learned to feast upon uncertainty, to fatten on disappointment, to enthuse over apparent defeat. I was frequently encouraged by my times in communion with Michael, Mother, the magisterial son, and other celestial friends. But I had to learn to accept that what I thought I understood in the silence was sometimes wrong. I believe any attempt at communication with the divine that passes through the mind of a mortal is potentially faulty. That's hard to live with. We mortals like things to be right or wrong, black or white, true or false. It takes spiritual maturity to learn to live in the gray areas of ambiguity. Nevertheless, the whole process of attempting to discern the divine will and to step out and act on it helped me grow spiritually. And at times, through spiritual perception, I foresaw events and learned things I could not have begun to know through ordinary means. I began to think of myself as a universe citizen and to greatly value my relationships with those on high. In particular, I grew to enjoy the presence of the magisterial son, who I began to think of as a friend. And when I heard him say 3 years ago that his mission would come soon, I did not know whether to believe it or not, but I set my mind and heart on doing all I could to help, and that has ultimately led me here today. I cannot be certain when the magisterial son will come, but uncertainty with security is the essence of the paradise adventure. Uncertainty about the dates and times of the arrival of the mission, uncertainty as to the events of the unfolding plan for our planet, but security in spirit and eternity, security in the unqualified trust that another son will come when the time is right. Will we be ready when he arrives? Or will our doubts and fears cause us to miss one of the great spiritual opportunities of the age? I've learned to open my mind and heart to the magisterial son and hope this presentation and the others we've heard today will inspire you to increasingly open yourself to his presence and the possibility of the arrival of a magisterial mission sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. Thank you so much. What a splendid presentation, as usual, inspired, scholarly, and from the heart. To me, this was a historic moment. Thank you so much, Mayor, for that. And let's hope we don't have to wait 87 years like Van did and have to train young people, because we don't have any young folks on here. And being that we're all pretty much over 50, we need a bathroom break. So we're going to do that now. And we're not going to have time to train the younger generation, perhaps. So the next unit will be some responses. And stay tuned. We'll be back in 7 minutes, correct?
Right.
All right. Some music break, music time, and see you back in 7.
No, no.
Yes.
This, I hope so.
All right, everybody, we're calling you back. Please return and we'll have our final section. And this will be emceed by Dave Tenney. So whenever you're ready, Dave, maybe give them another minute for folks to return. I see a lot of them not back.
Sure. It'll take a little bit longer, then Byron will be starting off with some closing comments. Then I'll offer some, and then Mayor will end with a closing prayer. Then after our formal conclusion, that will conclude our presentation formally. After that, we'll extend our time on Zoom for another maybe 20 minutes just to share reflections on the presentation with one another. And so that's what's ahead. I'm going to see how we're doing with attendance.
I think you should restart,
Okay.
Dave.
So Byron, why don't you go right ahead?
Thank you, Dave. I want to also again acknowledge Mayor for what she said and thank her for her prophetic view of the future, which was what inspired me to approach Mayor and Dave to start our group, the Light and Life Communities. And in particular, she had, as she alluded to, contact with Mon Jorensen and to develop a friendship. And now I'd like to invite everybody to develop your own friendship with him. And bearing in mind, he's coming with an entourage of other beings as well. And we're going to be in relationship with them, maybe not in 87 years, maybe sooner. So if you will, I'd like to invite everyone to have a little bit of an experience of his presence, if you would like. Obviously, this is optional and something you can observe and witness, or you can try to make contact yourself. And so I'm going to walk us briefly through an exercise that will start with contacting the always present, always already presence of Christ Michael and Mother Spirit. And I'm going to allude to the monastic practice of the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is to breathe into your heart the presence of Jesus Christ. And I'm going to begin that by inviting you to just breathe deeply into your heart and kind of witness the breath going into the heart. And allow your heart to sort of breathe in and out. And in the in-breath, breathe in Christ Michael. Breathe in his presence, Mother Spirit's presence. Breathe that in to your heart, and on the out-breath, continue to feel the presence. So let's do that for a bit. Breathing in the presence of Christ Michael. May his mercy be upon us. May his love be with us. May his angels minister to us. Breathing in again the presence of Michael and Mother. So let's do that for a minute on your own, breathing in the divine presence into the heart. If you like, you can invite him, ask him, dear Christ Michael, please sit in my heart. Come and sit in my heart. Thank you, presence of Spirit of Truth, Christ Michael. Thank you, presence of the Holy Spirit of Mother Spirit. Thank you, thought adjusters, for your always presence within us. So now I'd like to invite those of you who choose to do so as an optional exercise, and the rest can witness. I'd like to invite you to do the same, to invite the Avonal Son in the same way. The Avonal Son is also deity. It's Paradise Son, stemming from the God the Son and God the Spirit, stemming from the eternal Trinity. He is an object of prayer and worship. So if you would like, try to contact him and breathe his presence into your heart. Mondranson, or whatever you name you'd like to call him, Avonal Son, come into my heart and reveal yourself. Breathing him in. On your out breath, feel his presence. You may thank him for his presence if you like. And if you like, gather your impressions and share them afterwards in our sharing session, in our reflection session, if you want. Let's go another minute. If you can contact his presence, perhaps invite him to come closer to our planet. I want to thank everybody for engaging in this brief exercise. If you could return and hear me out for a few more minutes, I'd like to respond to what's been said. Most of you know that from way back I'm an activist, and some of us may want to join in an active effort to co-create a new world with the magisterial son and his entourage, which we believe has been here a long time making preparations. And so my response really to what's been said is even for folks who think this is a long way off, we can think of ourselves like the Hebrews, who had centuries of anticipation of the Messiah, mainly through, beginning with Moses and through the prophets, Isaiah, Zechariah, Jeremiah, Amos, and other prophets who prophesied and doing kind of what we're doing here. They're anticipating this Advent. That was the point of, or one of the main points of Mac Vena's presence, was to prepare a people to receive the Creator's Son. And in a way, we're a people that's being prepared to receive a new Son. And so toward that end, I'd like to invite those who are moved to join in myself and some of us in an effort to create what we call Light and Life groups. And we have another name for this, which is welcoming committees. So to be a welcoming committee for the Magisterial Son, I'm going to bring up a slide, and hopefully it'll work this time. And so bear with me while I do that. Yeah, it worked. So walk you quickly through this. Call it the Magisterial Mission Welcoming Committee, or an LLG, a Light and Life group. And if you're part of a Light and Life group, which it's possible that one group is already starting in Santa Fe, convening an LLG, the Light and Life group, makes you a part of the welcoming committee. Each LLG welcomes the advent of a magisterial mission and pledges to personally receive the Magisterial Son and his incarnate companions locally. And here's some recommendations, recommended activities. You know, to the extent possible during the pandemic, to have in-person meetings so that we can have these online meetings nationally, but this is face-to-face because the Magisterial Son will someday be face-to-face with us. Second, of course, is spend time in communion like we just did. Third is to study and herald the magisterial mission. Fourth is to be a community and attend to the needs of folks in your community. And finally, in my sense of things, is that we would have national online meetings of these groups down the road in the years to come. That is specifically the activists. And for your group, this is a recommendation down below here, is to have some governance provisions. Number one, to have somebody be your convener. Have somebody be your convener. If you want to create one of these groups, it's great to have a leader or a convener, and this person will report into the welcoming committee, the national group. Secondly, new members can be invited, but I would suggest by group consensus. Thirdly, I would suggest that within the group there may be disagreements and that conflicts be resolved using Jesus's three-step method. Page 159, it's in the lesson on forgiveness. This is how we deal with disagreements and grievances. Very, very important. And in order to do this three-step method, a group must constitute itself like a congregation. So Jesus said, in the third step, when a person is really difficult for the group, the congregation as a whole has to decide whether this person's in or out. So I commend that to those who want to try it. Fourthly, would like to invite those who are geographically isolated to be members at large of the welcoming committee. And then we can invite each other to create other governance provisions. And I'll just say in closing that one of the things that I've learned in the Urantia movement is that a difficult thing for us humans is to group activity and governance. But I find that when we make just a few steps in that direction, much more can happen. And we owe this to the great mission of the Magisterial Son, that we can self-organize to meet them when they come, so that our tents will open when they're ready, just like Abraham walked in to, when Macavena walked into Abraham's tent. Get your tent ready. Get your folks locally ready, because they're going to make contact with us sometime, perhaps in our lifetime. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you for hearing me out on these things. And if you'd like to start an LLG, a Light and Life group locally, just email me. You can see in the chat how to email me and let me know that you'd like to do this. And I hope that some of you are inspired to work with us. So thank you very much. Pass it back to you, Dave.
Okay. Well, thank you, Byron, for your prayer or communion exercise in particular. Very nice.
Thank you, Dave.
So, I hope you've been finding this series of presentations as much value as I have, everyone. Our initial goals were to cultivate a greater awareness about the magisterial sun and mission as integral to our movement toward light and life on Urantia, and also to provide a diversity of perspectives. And I think we've had that today. We've heard from Barbara Newsom about her perspective, informed by her experiences in the early days with forum members, and by her association with one of our Urantia community's most respected elder, Carolyn Kendall. Contact was considered expected and normal, and the UB as a training manual for the coming magisterial son. We've heard Bays, or Robert Zarmast, who wrote a great article that I hope you'll all look at if you haven't seen it yet, back in '99. And you've heard him now inform us that he feels more than ever that the time is right for a magisterial son to arrive sooner than later. Byron has provided a historical overview of a wide variety of known celestial contacts around the world, including those related to the UB, and the many transcripts of the teaching mission about the magisterial mission. Donna has conveyed some of her own perspective about engaging with healing energetic work with Michael and Mother as preparation for our magisterial son and to move us further as a planet toward light and life. And my beloved Mare has shared some about her own personal experience of interconnection and friendship with our Ronald son, and her sense that he's coming soon. She encourages all of us to prepare to welcome him. I'd like to share a bit of my own story with you, and I hope that it'll be okay and useful in some way, at least to a few of you. Had a lifelong faith in God. UB has been a significant part of my life since '72, along with teachings from several other spiritual traditions. A spiritual teacher I respected once suggested that a person can attain a faith in God in three main ways: either by reading about, hearing about through others, or having direct personal experience or experiences. I think the same three ways can apply to our faith in our Avanal Son and his sometime arrival. And for me, it's been a combination of all three. Ever since my initial reading of the UB, I've been hopeful of a new visitation by one or another of our Paradise Sons. When I read Bays's excellent article in '99, and a few years later, Carolyn Kendall's in 2008, I understood why our magisterial son might be the one to come next. So my anticipation has grown. I also heard or read some of the transcripts of communications related to our magisterial son over the years, and that further increased my expectancy of his sometime arrival. Our UB refers to the value of the religion of personal experience numerous times. I've had several rather intimate conversations with a few different people very close to me who shared quite detailed descriptions of having very poignant contact and deep inner communication with their Avenal Son. One described being both surrounded and interpenetrated by his golden yellow light and love-filled presence, and being inwardly and repetitively informed, I am coming. I truly believe him. Another close friend has privately shared his own personal experience of being invited to step into the light-filled energy stream of our Avenal Son's spiritual presence. And during this very moving encounter, he saw his entire human life from an eternal and quite merciful perspective. I deeply respect and fully trust both of them and their stories, and that of Mayor's and others too. They have greatly strengthened my own faith and our Avenal Son's already present spiritual presence. That he is contactable, and that he will be coming in person sometime soon, sooner than later. I'm giving the condensed versions of these stories of my friends, but because hearing the stories meant a lot to me, I feel like even the short stories just might be of value to at least some of you too, and I hope they are. Lastly, my faith in the coming arrival of our Avenal Son has been further strengthened by a growing sense of my own personal experience of his loving spirit presence. God Jameson often encourages UBers to regularly set a time for what he calls a divine appointment with God. And I see a lot of value in that. For many years, I've had my own spiritual practice combining prayer, worship, and meditation, during which I seek communion with my Universal Father, our Universal Father, my beloved Spirit within, Michael and Mother, and often other spirit personalities, other members of our universal family. I've been including our Avenal Son too for quite a while, and I've been able to just gradually feel more aware of his personal spirit presence, have a slightly greater sense of his energetic essence, see his light a little more clearly, experience his spirit of unity more fully. And when I ask, I hear a bit better within about what I might do to prepare myself and perhaps how to help others to become more ready too for his sometime arrival and mission. So my intent in sharing some of my own experiences is to hopefully encourage some of you to begin making time for some personal communion on a regular basis, or to increase it if you already do so, and to include seeking contact with the spirit presence of our Avenal Son. I invite you to open your hearts and minds to him, allow for the possibility of some inner communion and guidance, and to begin welcoming him more into your life, cultivating a relationship with him, and joining with others who likewise want to prepare for welcoming him. Barbara suggested that perhaps instead of us waiting for him, he may be waiting for us to become ready individually and collectively. Perhaps the more we make time now to get to know his already present spirit presence, then the more likely we will be capable of recognizing him when he actually does come in person. May you each and all be increasingly filled with the spirit of love and unity on our way to light and life. Now, Mayor will lead a closing prayer.
I'm sure I'm biased, but thank you, Dave. There's something about your voice that makes me aware of being surrounded by our celestial family. I just am so appreciative of your efforts. Let's close our eyes for a closing prayer. Beloved Michael, adored Mother, hear our prayer. In this time of planetary crisis on a confused world, contaminated by rebellion and spinning rapidly out of control, divine guidance is sorely needed. Our hearts long to see you again. But if you cannot come personally now, and if it is within our Father's will, we request visible assistance in another form. Exchange the darkness for light. Transform chaos on our world with love. Re-implement divine patterns. We are ready to help. We stand shoulder to shoulder with our friends the angels and our brethren the midwares. We pledge ourselves to the service of a magisterial Son, and with the help of our thought adjusters, glorify the Father through us and bring about the rehabilitation of our world. If it is your will, we await a visitation with faith and thanksgiving. Amen.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
So that concludes the formal part of our presentation. And we'll extend our time another 20 minutes or so for some group reflections on the presentation and comments.
I didn't get that. Could you try?
So hopefully you did get that. And so we'll extend the time now.
So folks, we're going to stop recording so that you can speak your mind off the record. So right now I'll end the recording, and I thank all the speakers for being here today, and all of you as well. So signing off, and then we'll sign right back out, and we will unmute everybody after this. Here we go.